Trucks built to serve.
Back here, first things first, with Chris Canty. We're talking about the Cleveland Browns, a team hoping to bounce back after a disastrous season last year. Odell Beckham's first season in Cleveland turned out to be his worst as a pro, fewest yards per game of his career. He and Baker could never really get on the same page, and he, like Baker, has heard all the media scrutiny about it.
I know that I'm not perfect by any means. I know I've made mistakes. I know all of these things, but I think somebody should find some good into the way that I am, in the way that I live my life, because I'm not going to sit here and let you affect me, and it's going to bother me. All these people who talk on TV and have these things to say about me have never sat down and have a conversation, have never been at a dinner and we're just talking life or perspective, so they don't know. And I feel like they really want me to be in a box of somebody who I'm really not so badly that they'll never find a way to accept me.
What do you think, Nick?
Well,
You've been saying that for a while.
I agree with him because I've sat and had dinner with him because I know him. Because Odell's a good guy. Odell is really well liked by his teammates. Odell cares a tremendous amount about winning. Odell also, he wants the media to accept him. I think he needs to accept that that is not going to happen and have it bother him. He can say it's not going to bother me. It's going to bother him. Maybe not forever, but it's going to bother him. Odell is also a sensitive guy. Odell is an emotional guy. And that some of that is what has made him him, but some of that has made him his own worst enemy. Odell obviously has had, about once a year, he has a moment where it's like, damn it, like I can't defend you. The picture in the hotel room in Paris, that wasn't great because it did appear there was some drugs in the room. The interview with Lil Wayne and Josina Anderson, that wasn't great because you didn't need to do it. The
LSU
partying
stuff
a little too hard during his team's national championship game and acting a bit of a fool the national championship game, that wasn't great. But all of these are either literal or figurative misdemeanors, at least to me. And the other stuff is nonsense. Like, we are picking at the action rather than, the actor rather than the action. The visor and the watch and the shoes. I could not possibly care less about it. But Odell needs to understand, I am rare as far as the way I approach this. Most media folks are have a much more, not politically speaking, but conservative approach to these things. And he's going to be constantly criticized. And there's only two paths forward. One is to change who you are. He's not going to. The other is to not give a damn about it, and it'll certainly help if your team starts winning, and then people will excuse it. I don't know if Odell actually can accept that he's not going to be accepted, but until he does that, he's going to get a lot of criticism that's going to hurt him, whether he wants to admit it or not.
Well, here's the thing. When it comes to Odell, he's one of the best to do what he does in the National Football League. He's one of the biggest superstars the game has had in the last 4 or 5 years. And so along with that comes a different degree of scrutiny. Similar to what we talked about last week with Kevin Durant, I don't think it's an apples-to-apples conversation. But I do think Odell and his lack of overall awareness, especially with certain situations, has gotten him in trouble with the media. You talked about some of the incidents. I would throw in the boat trip with that. The incident after he scored a touchdown in Philadelphia where he's acting like he's peeing like a dog, where the owner has to explain that celebration to the media, and it embarrasses him. So I think there are certain things that are inexcusable for a player with that type of platform, and I think Odell has to do himself a solid and try to keep himself away from those things, try to avoid those certain situations because you know what's going to come along with it. I don't think Odell is a bad guy. I think he's a solid sports character individual. I actually think he's personable when you get him away from the football field. But in terms of the things that he's done, there are certain things that are hard to explain, and I think that's where he gets tripped up with the media.
It's not that there's, there's certain things that's hard to explain, but you can't just brush off. I mean, here's 1, 2, 3, 4, the 5 things: the hotel room incident, the interview with Lil Wayne, the LSU, the throwing the money, the slapping the security guard, the boat trip, the dog celebration. They're all things. So you can't come out and say, wait, let me just finish. You can't just come out and say, I think the media is against me. I mean, the media wouldn't be against you if there was nothing to be against. The media Did they overblow the visor? Perhaps a little bit, but you keep fueling the fire by doing certain things. And if you want to say that it was overblown for the visor, the pants, the shoes, like, sure. These are things that are not overblown. One or two maybe, but there's 5 of them.
Okay, so the boat trip to me, total nonsense.
Okay, so take the boat trip off.
Okay, well, that's the start of it. I'm old enough to remember Tony Romo going to Cabo before a playoff game.
Didn't work out well for us. I was actually on that team.
Okay, and again...
Just putting that out there.
Right, but I do not think you guys lost because Tony Romo went to Cabo.
Well, here's the thing. I don't think you needed the distraction of it because that was a conversation in real time. I was actually in that locker room. That was something where other players had to answer questions about your quarterback's bye week.
Right, and so...
That ain't great going into a divisional round game.
No, I respect that and I appreciate that. To me, some of this stuff, though, becomes a snake eating its tail, where it's not good because it's a distraction. It's a distraction because it's not good. Like, there's nothing inherently wrong with either of these things, but because the media has an approach, the media in general has an approach different than mine, it becomes a story when I don't think that should have been a story, or the boat trip should have been a story.
Okay, the hotel room, I don't want to go through the hotel room with drugs, the behavior at the LSU.
Okay, so again, I can go, we can go tick for tick on it. Listen, people can they can clutch their pearls on this stuff, and hold on, now let me finish.
Sure.
They can clutch their pearls on this and act like we are shocked that a young, rich, famous pro athlete in his offseason might be having a random, seemingly sexual encounter with drugs in a room, even though that has been the story of young, rich pro athletes since there have been athletes. I would argue, Jenna, I can. Here's the thing. Here's the difference here, and I respect your opinion on this, but you can't convince me that my outlook on this is wrong. It's just different. It is the idea that folks on the Odell thing, one of the reasons I get passionate about it is I empathize with him in this regard. People want my commentary to go in the same box they want his actions to go in. I think the general public is wrong. I think the idea that what Odell did in Paris has anything to do with whether or not he can be a great football player is nonsense. I think everyone has lost their damn minds on that. I think there is just we accept it as a fact, and so we say, well, we must then criticize it, even though off camera, off the air, off radio, everyone says, well, of course, there's dozens of athletes who are in drugs with a hotel room with an Instagram model. That's part of the reason you practice so hard, to have those moments. But everyone says that privately, but publicly we have to be these scolds. I won't do it. The advice I would give Odell is to recognize the media is not going to go through a massive paradigm shift over the next 10 years of his career. So he either has to accept the criticism or change who he is. He is not going to change who he is. So he has to recognize the criticisms are going to come with it.
Here's the one thing I will say, and I'm with you for most of what you're saying, but the part about the interview that he did with Josina Anderson, or what he did in the locker room after the national championship games, those were mistakes. Those were missteps. And at some point, he's going to have to be accountable for his actions. This is not the media bullying him. He is not a victim with those particular circumstances. Now, if you want to talk about the hotel room in Paris or, you know, the boat, I get all of that stuff. There are certain things that he has to be accountable for because they are mistakes. And there's no way you can excuse that type of behavior.
And the LSU thing, I said it on this show. Yeah. It wasn't the money I didn't care about. Listen, you can't slap the security guard on the butt like he kicked a field goal. Yeah. We know that. But there are certain guys we allow to make mistakes and to grow. There are certain guys who we simply say, you are good for our television show. So your watch is a story. Your visor is a story. Your shoes are a story.
Individually, it's not a story, Nick. When you had 12 things together, you can't say they don't become a story because you're friends with the guy and you like him and you like his sort of brazen personality. You put 12 of those things together and it becomes a pattern. That's why the media talks about him. I'm not criticizing you. I was criticizing Odell for saying, I don't know why the media is always has it out for me.
He didn't say the media has it out for me.
He says...
What did he say?
He says the media doesn't understand who I am.
Correct.
And as a result, they're always after me for everything I do, and they're not going to understand. Well,
I don't think he said they have it out for me. He says they don't understand him. And I think this is good evidence of that. I think people do not understand him. I think, listen, we can spend all this time on a great player's misdemeanors if we want to, and we can brush under the rug other great players actual felonies. Like, not theoretical felonies, actual felonies, because it's fun and interesting to talk about the guy. And I can say as someone, whether I knew him or not, say, man, that would be frustrating if I were him. If I know there are star wide receivers celebrated who are bad guys, and I'm immature, and I like to party a bit, but I care about winning, and my teammates love me, and I'm always lumped in with these actual character issue people, it would piss me off if I were him. And on his behalf, I will continue to be angry about it. And until he actually does something that is a real bad act, I think we talk about him unfairly. And I think he's a superstar player, and he had a terrible year where he had 1,000 yards when his quarterback was one of the 3 worst quarterbacks in football this year.
No, I don't think anyone
and that
can
gets
doubt.
forgotten.
He is no one's doubting what he obviously does on